The pinnace looked like a scoop of ice cream dropped onto a scalding sheet of glass. The bottom was melting and spreading in every direction. The escaped crewman flew some distance, but seemed to be pulled by gravity toward that plane marked by the melting pinnace. His feet touched the plane and immediately melted into a shiny puddle. The rest of his body also began to spread out on the plane, and he had only time for a scream that was abruptly cut off.
If you had Vin Scully or John Miller, like someone who's really good at it, doing it like, oh, Cixin Liu, returning to his desk after a 5-minute break, he does appear to be, like those guys could make it kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, he seems to have an idea. Now, it's been a long time since we've seen Cixin Liu have a new idea, but it does seem like he seems to be reaching I think those guys could make that interesting somehow.
Yeah, that would be.
Or at least it would be an interesting challenge.
Totally. There's this endurance sports commenter, Steve King, who manages like in the same way of like Vin Scully or Yeah. I don't know if we put Harry Carey in this category because like he got
not really no
he's like
Harry Carey is entertaining, but like it's sort of beside the sporting event is beside the point.
Yeah, it's very kinetic.
Well, they're still running on the trail.
I don't know
they're
why.
They're running like they're trying to get away from something, sort of like I was trying to get away from my third ex-wife. What do you think of that?
That is true.
Sure, wearing some short shorts. Why do they wear such short shorts, Steve?
Harry Carey's victory is like still managing to make it entertaining while basically not covering the subject material. Yeah. Like it's like performance art. Whereas, like the really good play-by-plays, like you're talking about Vin Scully, and I think Gino Arrieta does this really well. There's sort of they're somehow doing like depth of human experience along with the play-by-play.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Grounded to second should be an easy play for Bauer, and he tanks it, as we all do from time to time, even upon the most easy of tasks. Bauer picks himself up. Second baseman has to learn how to make mistakes and live with it. Bag is at the plate, or is it Bragg?
Darren Bragg. He's certainly never been confused with someone named Bag.
Well, we'd better get to recapping, man.
Way to go on the recap, though, man. I'm very impressed that you managed to get it into not only 2 pages, but like a pretty brisk and like summative 2 pages.
I will note that I was like, I did it. I wrote most of it, and then you and I recently had a texting exchange where you expressed how you wanted our recaps to be shorter, and then I noticed that roughly like another 300 words appeared about the very last.
I couldn't tell if what you were doing was like a little bit of like
Zheng Xin and Guan Yifan learned from Sofan that there are millions of civilizations in the universe, both now in the past and future. Many of these civilizations have discovered the universe is slowly using dimensionality. A possible explanation for the Big Bang is the moment the universe slips into the dark matter.
Yours was
it's essential to understanding the human story. You can't not have.
Yeah, but like I was like, did Jesse not read the last? Because your version of it was like,
I summarized it.
It's bad for the environment. I was like, what an interesting use of the term environment.
Is it wrong?
No, it's not. However,
there is more plot in the second half of this book than there is in most trilogies, plot, or certainly novels, right? Like there's like, where were we when we finished the last taping? We were at the Universal broadcast.
I have been sort of falling into a very odd experience of time just in thinking about this book and our show and the scope of the book and being like, wait, the end of the last show was only at like the 4th dimensional thing that happens between the 2 ships. I was like, that's half a book ago?
Yeah. It is, there is a lot. And I think part of it is just page count. Like, this is a much longer book, I think, than the other 2 novels do. This is Stevensonian in length.
Right.
and
we've
I don't
crossed
mind.
we've crossed the Stevensonian horizon.
Yeah.
that sucks in narrative and readers and never lets them escape.
We're in a Waterhouseian domain. We're in a Waterhouse. Well, maybe we should just dive in. I was just giving you a hard time.
Oh,
I get it because there's a lot.
Believe me, I was giving myself a hard time as I was writing it. I was like, God damn it, there's just no other way.
It is like you're like pretty much feel like, okay, so they escape, and then you're like, okay, this book has got to be pretty much done. And then there's like pretty much a novella, like in the last like 100 pages or so, that is almost like its own wonderful, weird, wild novella. Almost, it's like an epilogue that contains its own story. But anyway,
right.
So we are wrapping up Cixin Liu's 2010 novel Death's End, which also wraps up his trilogy, Remembrance of Earth's Past, often colloquially known as the Three Body Trilogy. Released, it was released in English in 2016, translated by the great Ken Liu. I think I can tell the difference between Ken Liu's translations and the
Joel
other guys.
Martinson's. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
There's this
they're both good,
yeah.
but I kind of sense a slightly different flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Last time we left with the Universal broadcast, where gravity and Blue Earth have basically revealed to the universe where Trisolaris is. So Sophon announces that the Trisolaran fleet is no longer coming to Earth because they are afraid that the whole vicinity is no longer safe. So they're getting the heck out of there, and humanity can move back to the rest of the planet. However, the asterisk with that bit of good news is that the expectation is that first Trisolaris, and then, shortly later Earth, maybe 100 years later, maybe a couple years later, will also be subject to destruction. But that's cool. We get to go back to the big cities. And then a few, years later, Trisolaris is blown up. Everybody can see it. At this point, everybody freaks out. And I think this is roughly where the false alarm panic happens, when there's some kind of broadcast that actually turns out to be substantial. I don't remember what it was, but everybody thinks that perhaps the sun is going to blow up, and so they mob the spaceports, and it's a bad scene. People are killed. There's a harrowing adventure for AA and Chengxin and some poor children who are subject to the worst pop quiz of their lives. Why don't you take it from there?
Yeah. So, after the false alarm is kind of wrapped up, Sophon summons Luoji and Chengxin to tea a few times. And, we're sort of in this odd period of the book where we're past the broadcast, but we're ahead of what's going to happen to Earth in the solar system. And so now we're in this kind of period where we kind of have to figure out, what's Earth going to do to surmount this particular challenge?
Earth has a dilemma.
Right, exactly. We have another piece in an ever-ascending set of plot devices that give us the novel. And so we learn
Talk about stakes.
Yes, yeah, right? I don't know, all the times we've talked about stakes, in a sort of universal thing, all of our discussions about stakes could not fit into 1/1,000,000th of the stakes that are put forth in this novel.
Yeah. Everybody and everything might die.
And everything that ever was and ever will be.
And it gets bigger.
Yeah, exactly. So Sophon reveals that one of the things that humanity could do is broadcast what's more like a safety notice to the universe, which would keep other civilizations from attacking because they would see our solar system as harmless. But she doesn't reveal in any way what that might be. The second time, Sophon says that she is leaving. And we are reminded that Sophon is really just a piece of software, even though the people in the book and us as well have kind of gotten attached to Sophon as a character, which is, I think I'm going to get back to that a little bit later. But she drops a big bomb that is Yun Tiangming from much earlier in the book, who we thought is just a frozen brain headed off into space brain, frozen space brain. That should have been the title. is actually alive and would like to talk to Cixin. The Trisolarans have found him. They've reanimated his brain, cloned a body. Cixin meets him through this Sophon-mediated link between her and him. They are under a lot of pressure because the Trisolarans don't want Yang Tianming to reveal secrets about their technology. And so if they kind of feel like that's happening, they might just blow her up. And there's even there is a yellow warning, but they also tell her, you could go from safe to dead. We might just decide to just kill you. But they have this good conversation. A few times they wander into the yellow territory, so they kind of back off. And Yang Tianming tells her 3 fairy tales. And there's this great sort of again, his kind of sleight of hand where he's like, hey, you remember all those stories we made up when we were kids? And Cixin is like, yes, yeah. I do. But you know what?
I do.
I don't remember them.
Remember the details.
Do you think you could tell me a few of them?
Yeah.
And Yang Tianming is like, oh, well, you are famous in Trisolaris because I gave you writer credit.
Oh. Right.
Of the 1,000 fairy tales that I have been disseminating to the Trisolarans. Here's 3. And proceeds to tell her 3 wonderfully penned little meta-narratives that sit inside of this larger narrative, and I will toss her back to you.
They're great in and of themselves, I think. At least I thought so. These stories of a princess in the storyless kingdom and her plotting evil brother and an artist named Needle Eye who paints people into paintings, and they become trapped in 2 dimensions, as it were. So they believe. So then the Trisolarans do not blow up Cixin. She gets to return back to Earth, and they and some of the other sort of leaders of Earth decide that these fairy tales must have some kind of coded message. So they set about trying to decode them, and it's complicated. But they eventually determine that the hidden messages suggest, they kind of figure out the code with this wonderful adventure in Norway that basically cracks one of the sort of meanings. And once they crack one of the meanings, they kind of determine the pattern of how the various codes, the information is encoded, and they crack the rest. And what they learn is that what Earth could do is slow down light speed in the solar system to turn the solar system essentially into a black hole, but not the kind of black hole where everybody dies, just the kind of black hole where we could never, ever leave the solar system. And that, in fact, would mean that we're safe. We can't possibly threaten another civilization if we can't leave. And also slowing down the speed of light would also protect Earth from light speed.
Photoids.
I forget the term. Photoids.
Yes.
So it would also be kind of like a shock absorber for any kind of attack that would come our way too. And then AA figures out that one of the metaphors in the fairy tale also suggests this principle of curvature propulsion, a way of achieving light speed by bending space itself. And they start kind of working on this concept. And right around this time, Wade gets out of prison and he's like, I know I tried to kill you last time we talked, but this time I want you to give me everything you own. And basically asks if he can take over Halo and says, if you let me take over your company, I will build the Lightspeed drive, and humanity can escape. Cixin agrees because she does think Wade, no matter how diabolical he is very capable, and that humanity needs light speed travel. So she's like, you have the keys to the castle. We're going to take a nap. And she and A hibernate. They wake up 60 years later. Wade is an old man now. And he has built a not super functional version of a prototype, but enough that we're like, okay, this is conceptual. I think they make a hair move like an inch or something like that, but at the speed of light, so it's exciting. And the government, though, wants to crack down on them because they consider light speed propulsion a form of escapism. So there's this kind of standoff that's happening at this orbital planet colony city, and Wade is ready to go to war, and he's built this army with these anti-gravity weapons, but Cixin basically says, you have to step down. You promised me you would do do whatever I say. And so Wade surrenders. He is arrested and I believe executed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, he gets vaporized by a laser.
Yep. Humanely.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that probably would be a not bad way to go. So Chengxing and AA hibernate again. This time, however, they are woken up, and they sort of realize that they've been woken up probably a little abruptly. And this interstellar object has been spotted. Sort of headed in the direction of the Earth. And in fact, there was like another bigger object that kind of dropped it off near the Oort cloud. And they're like, ooh, that almost certainly was like an intelligent ship. So what's going on here? They send out a ship to intercept it. And a student of Ding Yi, who went to visit the droplet and was vaporized, realizes that, in fact, after a lot of sort of exploration of it and examination of this paper slip...
And a wonderfully terrible nightmare.
Oh, my God. I couldn't sleep. This book ruined a night of sleep for me.
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
It's all right. No, I was like, well, I mean, this book is certainly effective.
Yeah.
And what this thing can do is it flattens three-dimensional space into two-dimensional space. And all of the solar system is going to get sucked into it because it pulls space towards it. The only way to escape is a light speed drive, which, of course, we don't have. Because Chengxing shut down Wade's corporation that could do that. Humanity realizes that it's doomed. AA and Chengxing are sent on a mission to Pluto, where basically a giant tomb of Earth artifacts are being assembled. Even though they know it's going to get flattened into two dimensions, they think, okay, some record of us might be preserved here. It turns out that this new spaceship they're on is actually capable of light speed. AA and Chengxing have the capacity to escape. Boom! They head off towards the solar system that Yun Tianming gave the star of to Chengxing hundreds of years ago at this point. They head that direction. It only takes them something like I think it's like 50 hours or something under light speed to get there. But
light speed travel is nearly instant, and true light speed I think would be instantaneous. This is something like 0.99999999999 light speed. Yeah,
the power of the exponential when we get to numbers this big is like, pretty large. So something like almost 300 years has passed while they have experienced the 52 hours of getting out there. And they meet one of the scientists that was on board Gravity, young...
Guan Yifan?
I've suddenly got it backwards. Guan Yifan.
Yep.
He has been hibernating for a long time. Gravity and Blue Earth have managed to get humanity out into the galaxy, and there are galactic humans. So we do a quick little world building. Guan Yifan is like, don't ever ask anybody where they're from. It's kind of like asking an interstellar woman how old she is. Don't do it. And I will kick it back to you.
And then he asks them how old they are, and they're like 400 and 700, which is a funny little moment.
I know, I love that.
I think AA says, we're just as old as we look. I'm 400 and she's 700. So there's this weird disturbance that happens on the next planet over. And by the way, the solar system is destroyed,
right.
We should say. Yes. Everybody has been turned into two dimensions. The Halo ship is the only lightspeed drive ship, and it was sort of built in semi-secret, sort of open secret kind of thing. Semi-secret. So there's this weird disturbance on another planet. Guan Yifan and Chengxing go there. They investigate and figure out what's going on. And while they're gone, Yun Tianming shows up. He's been given a ship, apparently, by the Trisolarans. He shows up for his date with Chengxin. But then poor Guan Yifan and Chengxin don't get to go down to the planet to join him because this weird disturbance happening in the planet turns the system into a black domain. They're sort of trapped in this, time vacuum, and then they get super accelerated, so they spin around the planet at an incredibly fast rate, which causes 18 million years to go by while they spend something like 12 days subjectively orbiting, mostly in hibernation, while their ship reboots. So finally, 18 million years have gone by on the planet, but they're like, well, maybe our friends are still there. I don't know. And so they go down to the planet, and sure enough, Yoon and AA are long dead, but they have lived a life together. I think the assumption is romantically that they, and they left behind a gift, which is a mini universe. I'll let you read your
Sure.
capstone paragraph here.
They enter the universe, and it's basically a universe that's just a kilometer cube, pretty much.
Yeah.
But if you leave one side of it, just like a video game, you're kind of returned to the other side. And they are able to
Berserk or
totally, yeah, exactly, right, yeah, something like that, where you leave one side of the screen and you come up on the other side of the screen. It's great.
and you can see you in the distance. You can wave at yourself, which is the very first image of the book.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. We also are reunited with Sofan, who is here. Of course, because this is a gift
copy.
from Young Tiangming, and from the Trisolarans. And they live in this little mini universe for several years. They learn Trisolaran, and they also learn that there are basically millions of civilizations in the universe now, both in the past, probably in the future. And many of these civilizations have learned that the universe is slowly losing dimensions, and that it's sort of down to 3, and in a lot of places 2, because of these 2-dimensional weapons that have been unleashed between, civilizations. And there's sort of this possible explanation that the Big Bang is the moment that everything finally compresses to just one dimension, a single point, into a singularity. And so there is one particular civilization called the Returners that are like, hey, everybody, we know you've been making mini universes to wait out the next Big Bang. You took too much mass away. If you do that, the universe won't ever collapse again and will simply spread out forever, and no one is going to be able to live in it. Please return your mass to the universe.
If everybody takes too much chili, there won't be enough for anybody.
Yeah, it's great. This book's final plot obstacle is basically the tragedy of the commons.
Right.
And so
and also somewhere slipped in there, the detail is that in order to send that broadcast to all the mini universes, they had to annihilate as much mass as a Milky Way sized galaxy. That's what's required to send that message.
Oh my God.
Which I was just like, did they just have an extra one with no life, or did they just do some kind of mondicide times a million? Did
they just do a Luoji hope and hit
for the best
and hit return?
Maybe there's a galaxy out there with conditions that are not amenable to life that you can just destroy, or maybe there's one that's already a supermassive black hole. Something like that. Not explained.
Chengxing and Yufan decide to do the right thing, or the right thing, and they return the mass of the mini universe to the grander universe and kind of set off into the grand universe as to see what the rest of their existence is like. And
with Sofan as their bodyguard.
Exactly right. Yes. As long as I'm around, nothing will hurt you. I think is one of the things that she says. And there we go. Boom.
I like how in this book, anytime our two main characters need a light speed ship, there's always one of it. At one point there's one in Pluto, at one point there's one hidden under the floorboards in the mini universe. Guan Yifan has an extra one kicking around. Just anytime these people need a light speed ship, the universe provides.
It sure does, yeah. I mean, this is, I've said my joke a lot of times that, sometimes in science fiction, it's not the speed of light, it's the speed of narrative that is that is truly the fastest thing ever.
That is the physics, yeah.
Right, and, there is some of that. It's similar to plot armor, where it's just because the point of these books, and this is something we've talked about a bunch, is not really the natural unfolding of plot. It's the glory of the idea. And, at this point, I'm kind of all right, yeah, this is a fun, incredibly imaginative place. my big question for you, so we basically have three major main characters in these three books. And I think a lot of my questions are going to bleed into like trilogy stuff. Yeah. But so we have Wang Miao in the first book, Luo Ji predominantly in the second book, and a little bit in the third book for sure, and Cixin in the third book. Out of these three main characters, who do you kind of...
who do you fuck with?
Right, who do you fuck with?
I gotta say Luo Ji of those three, because I think I certainly like Cixin, and maybe it's just the gender thing, but I also feel like she is maybe a little bit more pure-hearted than I am or imagine that I would be. I certainly think she does make the right decision at the end to accept her responsibility and come out of the mini universe. I think Luo Ji would probably make that decision too, that Luo Ji becomes an ethical person, even when the worst thing that Luo Ji does is blow up, his spell on the star. And as I recall, he says a prayer, but to himself before doing it. He doesn't do it callously and coldly. He uses his best. He's an astronomer, and he uses the best evidence available to find a star that likely does not have life. We don't know if he's correct about that or not, but he is not. So Luo Ji to me seems basically ethical, and I think it's rendered in a kind of ridiculous level of his sort of transition from kind of like completely irresponsible bachelor to like incredibly responsible, like earth defending badass. I don't think that I can relate to either extreme, but I think I can relate, like many Gen Xers, to a kind of trajectory of greater responsibility from sort of greater carefreeness. So I think he's probably mine. And I would say, but Cixin certainly very likable, very relatable. I don't know. I certainly have a soft spot for her as well. But what about you?
Mine is Wang Miao from the first book.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And my sense of our three characters is that they kind of flatten as we go, which I doubt was intentional, but but in the same way that the solar system is sort of flattened. Like, I can't really tell you much about Cixin. I like she sort of hits her marks as a character, and she does what's required of her. And if we shift back to Luo Ji, there's a little bit less of that. But, same sort of thing. And that they seem, as the books progress, and I think this is totally understandable given what he's trying to pull off. But in the first book, I just think about, I think about those scenes between Wang Miao and Da Sha and Ding Yi getting drunk in the locust field, and Wang Miao sort of marooned in that like strategic planning session, being like, what am I doing here? And there's more. I remember more about who he was than I was ever able to kind of get a handle around Cixin, and to a lesser extent Luo Ji. I think Luo Ji's presence in the third book really does help, because we really get this sort of avuncular defender of human history, and he's sort of turned into this kind of grandfatherly like figure, kind of kicking around Pluto, that does kind of complete his arc in I think a satisfying way. But yeah, I just found myself sort of wanting more of Wang Miao and Da Sha in the first book. I think the moments that work the best in this regard are sort of some of the quiet little moments between Cixin and AA. One of my favorites is when they have discovered the principle of curvature propulsion, and they're worried that the Sophons are spying on them, and they don't want to get young Tianming in trouble, so they just kind of like go about their evening having a girls' night in. And there's this sort of funny moment where then it's like, and then Cixin
they're kind of like giving each other sort of dating advice in a slightly judgy way. And AA is basically like, you just need to get laid. And Cixin's response is like, well, maybe your problem is that you kind of are dating a little too much. And then she says, of course, you're welcome to bring your boyfriends over, but maybe not both at the same time. And it's just this sort of little like, they're funny little like girly spat back and forth. I think that what kind of saves her a little bit is her relationship with AA and this kind of big sis, little sis. The little sis who is more the troublemaker and the big sis who is kind of more the innocent, which is kind of a fun dynamic. But yeah, I think to your point, and I think actually Cixin Liu has talked about this, that Cixin and to a lesser extent Luoji are kind of more ideas.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere in the middle of the second book, and certainly throughout this book, I think I started thinking of this as like reading a Homeric epic. And we're like, let's tell the story of the two lovers who were separated by 150 light years, and one of whom was merely a brain, and perhaps one day they will meet up. Oh, but they never do. Do you know what I mean? And there's even this story we learn. Remember, there's an echo of it. We hear that the Trisolarians have created this movie about two lovers who never meet, and they live at different sides of the Yangtze River.
Yep.
And that they sort of dream about each other. And that's kind of like the story of Yan Tinming and Cixin too. And so I think he's doing a kind of epic myth.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, like, what do you know about Achilles? What do you know about Hector? Hector is heroic, but then he does but he's also mortal and he's human. And when he has to fight Achilles, what's the first thing he does? He breaks and runs, like most of us would do in that situation. And finally, he's sort of tricked into being heroic by Athena, which is kind of what happens to Luoji, right? Like, and I think the characterization is kind of like at that level. We have the dutiful prince, Hector. We have the arrogant, super talented, the gods all like him, even though he's kind of an asshole warrior, Achilles. And that's kind of the level of characterization that we're getting here. And what that level of characterization does is let you tell a really big story efficiently, because we're not really going to spend all that much time. Now, he does put in a little bit of texture here and there, and it's the same thing about, like, Hector running around the walls 3 times, and both of them kind of being aware that this is a kind of unwinnable fight for both of them, that sort of thing. You get few little moments like that. But I think I just have kind of adapted that that's the way characters work in this book, and I'm okay with it because I like what he does with it.
Yeah. And I think
if the ideas weren't so interesting, it would be boring.
Totally. And I think that's one of the reasons why the fairy tale setup is so effective, because they're so good. They function very nicely as traditional fairy tales, and like you find yourself getting connected to these characters because we're there's always this thing about Picasso where people are like, abstractions, cubisms, lines, stuff like that. Like, if Picasso had wanted, he could have banged out stuff on the order of, the great Dutch masters and Renaissance painters and things like that. But he wanted to do something else. And I think that's one of the things that we get to see here. Like I'm starting to conflate character and author. Cixin Liu really can sure write a yarn. Absolutely. Yeah. If he wants to, he can go ahead and do that.
And I think he could write a romantic love story, an internal love story. And you get, the moment when we see Yan Tianming for the first time and he's like standing there in the wheat.
Oh my God. It's so Tolstoy.
Yeah. I feel like, we're in kind of a romantic novel right now, and he's changed and he's more self-confident, and we get sort of Cixin's feelings for him, and, he can do it if he needs to. He's just not that interested in doing it most of the time.
And there's this great sort of Sword of Damocles happening in that conversation where like a lover's discussion across centuries and, you know, millions and millions of kilometers is also being sort of like, it's also happening under this, it's not a microscope, you know, it's a laser. And pretty much. And so the tension and the stakes of that scene are really big and also really personal. And
it's a nod to 1001 Nights.
Totally.
Too,
Absolutely.
Right? Like here's this captive who is entertaining his captors. And I just love the image. You know, we get the detail that apparently the Trisolarans let them talk for like an extra 10 minutes or something like that. And I just have the image of like whatever Trisolarans are spying on them at that moment, like kind of like weepily leaning on each other and holding tentacles and watching, just listening to the fairy tales, you know, carapace to carapace or whatever body structure they have, kind of sighing. Because they also are not immune. I think they love the romance of Yun Tianming and Cheng Xin. You know, they have regard for her. They give him a spaceship. They like this story of the two star-crossed lovers, and they're going to play their part in reuniting them. And it's super sweet and funny and surreal and yes, tense.
Yeah, and you pointed this out last time that like love is part of the Trisolarans' culture. It's just been repressed because of the calmness that is necessary to exist in the universe.
Right.
And that one of the pieces of this story is that like the two cultures are changed irrevocably by the experience of each other, which I think goes back to the point that you've been making pretty steadily, that this is not a hopeless and cynical novel. But you've got a question about plot.
Yeah. So for the last book, you said that you felt that there was blocking rather than plot. Mm-hmm. I'm gathering that you like this book better than The Dark Forest. Maybe I'm wrong about that. There certainly is more action, right? And one of the problems with The Dark Forest is that kind of long sort of stretches. Mm-hmm. Do you still see blocking rather than plot, or does this book have something more like plot?
I do still see blocking instead of plot. But there's enough more in this book that I really don't care. Because like you know, last time when we were talking about The Dark Forest, I sort of begrudgingly was like, yeah, this is fine. You know, like it's interesting enough. And I do think that the point that I made about like just how difficult it is to write a middle book. It's hard to write a middle anything. It's hard to be a middle child. Like, it's brutal. So I do think this is a more effective book. I do still think that he uses the tools of plot and characterization more for his own ends than to let those things breathe and expand and exist on their own, which, again, to our discussion last time, is totally fine.
Right.
Because I think the heights that he gets to, and, you know, we're kind of nibbling around the edges of this. Like, this is opera. This is so big. And like, when you go see an opera, you're not like, that's unrealistic. Like, fuck off. Like, you know,
it's the Trisolariad, right?
Like, exactly, right.
I mean, it is... Wade is like Achilles, you know, the Trisolarans are like Athena, you know, these are stories of characters who are being manipulated by forces that are bigger than they are. And so it becomes a story about how they are battered and bruised by those forces, and perhaps how it shapes them and where it takes them. But yeah, it is, I think it's a different conception of human agency, right? Like in the Western tradition, and maybe this is what's Chinese about it, we expect that the characters will take action to bring about change in the circumstances. And Cixin Liu, I don't know, what experience in Cixin Liu's life or upbringing might convince him that that actually is bullshit, and that actually the institutions around us shape our lives, and all we really do is experience those lives. You know, is that something that he might be familiar with? And also, like, if you look at history, is this sort of American or Western ideal that we're the master of our own destinies? is there anything that might reveal that that's a bit of an illusion, that a comforting illusion that we perhaps have told ourselves in the kind of like post-war era, the height of American power and the American middle class, when we've had more global power and individual power than sort of like any humans have ever had in the history of the world, and we think that's what life is like, and our narrative our narrative conventions are supposed to reflect that. That was a long rhetorical question I just asked you.
Yeah, but like, the point is well founded and well sharpened too. That, like, it really does point out the limitations of individualistic Western thinking, because, like, if the thing that's going to happen is not only everyone that you have ever known, but everything that has ever been is going to be literally flattened into 2 dimensions and then disappear, because we learn later in the book that the flattening that we see is just the expression of the energy, much in the same way that when we saw the 4th dimension into 3 dimension, that left behind some trails of light for a little bit. That this is complete eradication. And that is something that Western minds struggle with because of our adherence to individualism, you and I have talked about this too, and lots of present day thinkers also being like, gosh, this thing of like Western rugged individualism, is this working out for us?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big things that I am taking from this book is, we're so used to in Hollywood and books and pop culture and whatnot, like a lot of the characters are American, and like there's this thing where it's like, they're American, or maybe they're English or something like that. And then, there's sort of
anything,
and they can do anything. And there is a small galaxy of different races that generally serve to support the plot. And I think one of the great things that is happening in this book is like, is sort of a letting us know that our experience is not the only experience. And that, like, if this book is out there, think of all of the other hundreds of incredible pieces of work that we're never going to be able to read, because language is also dimensional. It's the same experience of not being able to see another dimension is not being able to understand another language. Yeah. And I really think that is something that's going on here. I love your point about it being Homeric. We've brought that up before, that this is much more like an epic. And Wade is like the worst Odysseus ever, but on cocaine.
Yeah.
Like
Wade would totally kill every single suitor out of spite.
Oh, and there wouldn't be one Trojan horse. There would be like, the Trojans would wake up and there'd just be like 10,000 horses sitting on the plain. Odysseus comes up with the does. It's his call. I mean, Athena
one of them start with, is it the Aeneid or is it the Odyssey that starts with all the Greeks crying because they have to kill all the Trojan children or otherwise they'll take revenge? Do you remember that? Isn't
feels more like the Aeneid than...
I think that's the Aeneid, where they're like, this really sucks and we hate it. But obviously we have to do it. I mean, there's no question about that. Otherwise, they'll just come after us and take revenge. That's a very Thomas Wade
it's very Dark Forest kind of thinking.
Yeah.
But no, and this, I mean, we can kind of eliminate one of my questions coming up, which about the rising action, which you have sort of already brought up, that like, there's this moment when Chung-Shin and AA get the Lightspeed drive on Halo, and they head to the planet, and like, little old happy ending Chris is like, okay, that sucks about the solar system, but we're gonna get a romantic ending. And then
poor Chris Bag.
You
want Chung-Shin to get the boy.
I do.
She gets a boy.
I want young Cheng-Ming to get the girl. And I think it's another brilliant, like, inversion of our hopes.
Oh,
That in fact that AA and Young Teng Ming probably end up together, and that Guan Yifan and Chengxin end up together as well, because like there really is no other option. But you sort of brought this up already. This book is essentially rising action after, like, the rising action never stops, I think.
Yeah.
What was your experience of discovering that final arc, like you said, is kind of worthy of its own novella even?
The first time I read this, I didn't like that part because I was really ready for it to be done. And I was like, where are we still, like what? I think we kind of told the story, like the solar system, and then, and also we're like, even if there's more, you kind of expect it to be sort of expository. Like this is going to be kind of like a long epilogue, like Cheng Yixin and AA's life among the galactic humans or something. And then they lived a long time and made many great physics and astronomy discoverers together. Kind of expecting like Grace at Rocky's planet playing the organ with all the spiders raising their hands,
Yes.
like
yes.
that's you're expecting that kind of ending, and nope. It's interesting, and so oddly, having read this, I guess this time, my third time, I actually really liked it this time. Because I think my expectations had already been shattered, and I was willing to just accept, like, okay, this is what we're doing. So, and then I could kind of take it as it is, and think, yeah, this is an interesting set of ideas. This whole idea of waiting out the Big Bang, and then waiting for the new Edenic universe, and then, but also, is that responsible thing to do? I remember many years ago being really nervous about the heat depth hypothesis and reading some science that suggested, some new matter had been discovered, and now scientists thought that it's the gravitational constant. No, is it the gravitational constant? It's the omega constant. It's a number that at 1, the universe expands to a finite point and stops. At less than 1, it expands to a certain point and it collapses. And at greater than 1, it expands forever. And I remember thinking it was very poetic and interesting that all the scientific observation seems to suggest that it's almost exactly 1. What does that mean? And it's one of those things where you're like, well, why were we even here at all? Why is there even matter? And so the idea that we're going to actually explore these things, and that there's actually like civilizations out there sort of like being like, well, we better have a Big Bang again, because we've kind of messed up the environment. Wonderfully mind-bending. But it really took me 3 reads to enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, maybe because I did come around to enjoying the final arc. I had a little bit of like, oh my God, here we go again. I was like, oh geez, another stretch of time where like they're gonna have to figure something out technological, and they're stuck on the ship, and like they can't really move.
Yeah, and there's a sort of like, come on, right? You know what I mean? Like there's a sort of like, are we always in a cliffhanger? Are we always in an adventure story? At that point, but I think I came around to it. I have to say I'm incredible. It's the thing you say about rising action. Like halfway through this book, could you imagine sort of 4 escalations of the stakes? Like that's just badass,
right.
That he's able to just do that at all, and I mean, we're even sort of like, okay, we're going to be hit by a photoid. That's all right. We'll hide behind Jupiter. No, that's not going to work. We're going to be turned into 2-dimensional. That's all right. Our heroes can escape. No, that's not going to work. I mean, and then, all right, whatever. They're going to hide out in a mini universe. And it's sad that the lovers didn't get to meet. But there's this, I love the moment where they discover the monument that Yun Tianming and AA have left behind for them. And there's this moment where they are both like kind of they've been mourning the loss of their friends and the fact that they miss them and sad and depressed. And when they get that message, you know, there's this peace and calm that comes over them, you know, and this sort of happiness. And so in the end, it wasn't what I expected, but I kind of end up liking it, you know, and also just like Cixin Liu, it's like you don't. I would just never gonna bet on him going small.
Totally.
You know what I mean? It's just like, he's gonna be the guy who goes big, and I think if you're gonna read him, you got to be there for that, because that's what he's great at, and that's where his brain goes. And it is. There's almost the like Robert Jordan, George R.R. Martin problem of like how you've crafted this wonderful world building universe, you've built all the chess pieces, and there's so many, and then what's there to do but tip them all over and make them fight, which ends up almost always being boring. And he actually kind of thinks his way out of that problem by just creating a new set of problems, which is kind of wonderful.
I think, I mean, like a lot of my experience of this book, and I think it's great, or in this trilogy, is, is really being confronted by something I did not expect. And I think, and I brought a poem that we can either stick in at the end. It's another Polish poet, because, those guys were great. And I think also, like, there is a real connection between poets of the, Polish mid-century and, Cixin Liu and other like Chinese authors who also have had to experience autocracy and things like that. So we can get to that if we have time. What's your question about astronomy?
What do you make of the fact that our surviving four, plus Luoji, you have an astronomer, another astronomer, an astrophysicist, and another astrophysicist. And these are the humans who get the light speed drive and are allowed to escape. And also they're the humans who are kind of dealing with this dilemma of whether or not they get to witness the new Big Bang or not. And there's a lot of emotional stakes around. All four of them kind of express the idea of a black domain being horrific to them, even though I'd be fine with it as long as there's good surfing and hiking, Like, I would be totally fine being trapped in this solar system forever, particularly if that meant we weren't going to get destroyed and it was better for the environment. So just what do you make of the last humans in the universe, as far as we know, being either astronomers or astrophysicists, and also the second to last human to die in the solar system being Luoji, another astronomer?
Yeah, I mean, another great side feature of talking about these books is sort of feeling the physics of narrative kind of coming apart in front of us. Like, because in some way, like, you need to pick characters that are going to be able to convey your ideas effectively. And so we're stuck a little bit. And like, it is a little bit of a contrivance that's the case. But in order to play in this world and to become connected with the reader, you're going to have to be an astronomer or an astrophysicist probably, because like somebody else who doesn't have that level of experience, it's not going to be plausible that they're going to be sticking around at this point. And like
they're the only people who have a chance at being anything like a protagonist, because they're the ones inventing light speed drives and discovering the dark forest nature of the universe and theorizing what's going to happen at the Big Bang and that sort of thing.
So, I mean, it is one of those moments where like you can kind of see through the like authorial curtain. But there's also, I don't think there's really anything to do about it. Like this, like, you brought up Project Hail Mary, and there's this great part in that where he's like, why on earth did you pick me? I'm a science teacher. And eventually it becomes clear like why that is, through like a great little piece of revelation. Yeah, I mean, it's a contrivance, but in order for the physics of the book to work, I can't really imagine it working any other way. And so I'm okay with it. I mean, like, I have been sort of pulled kicking and screaming into liking this trilogy. But eventually, just like being sucked into two dimensions, like, that's the only world there is. And I think that's why I had such trouble sleeping when the two dimensioning happens, because he is able to render things in really horrifying and effective detail. But we wouldn't have gotten to this point in the plot without those characters being who they are. And so it's sort of an unfortunate truth, and it goes back to the Grace Paley thing, that like a lot of the characters in this novel do not get the open possibilities of life.
Yeah.
But you can't. Like, Grace Paley is writing stories about conversations with her father, and that's important and wonderful and big in a different way.
But those poor people trying to escape on sublight drives when the solar system is collapsing, and we hear their radio transmissions, and then they see Chengxin and AA on their lightspeed drive, and they're like, "Stop them! Ram them! Don't let them get away!" And they do not get what is it? The open possibilities of life.
No, they do not.
Nope. They get the closed possibilities of a collapsing solar system.
Yeah. He is intensely not sentimental about anyone. In a way that I think people wanted the showrunners of Game of Thrones to be. Though actually, I wonder if people would have liked it if those showrunners had been as unrelenting as Cixin Liu is, because it's hard. The detail of the mother holding her baby above the two-dimensional plane to give it life for last few fractions of seconds, that one's going to stick with me for a while.
Yeah, you're right. He's not, and those people are sacrificed to the thought experiment, the narrative vision.
Totally.
It's not the blood sacrifice that gets us the happy ending. It's the blood sacrifice that gets us the big idea.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it gets us all and I think you have a reading and I have a reading probably to illustrate that. The best moments, most literary evocative moments, are moments of tremendously scaled tragedy.
Yep. Yeah,
in
absolutely.
This entire series.
Yeah, the space battle, the moment that Gravity and Blue Earth, their face off.
Trisolar Day.
Right, yeah, all of that stuff.
The planets in apogee, the people getting sucked
off of the planet.
Into the sun. I mean, those are the moments. Well, I think you have a reading like that, right?
I do,
Isn't that?
So this is... They have experienced the paper slip. There is a science ship called Revelation that has been sent to examine it. And because the paper slip doesn't appear to have any mass, it doesn't appear to have any presence or anything in this dimension, it can actually just pass through the ship's hull and is sitting inside Revelation's sort of science lab for a while, where they try to make head nor tails of it. One of the scientists begins to be like, the penny begins to drop, and he's like, we need to start getting away from this thing. And he kind of goes off to his lab and starts crunching numbers and everything like that. So I'm not going to read any of that part, but here we go. 50 hours after the separation from Revelation, the gravitational wave emitted from the paper slip disappeared completely. The white light from it blinked twice and also went out. The slip of paper was gone. Has it evaporated? Vasilenko asked. I don't think so, but we can't see it anymore. Ice shook his head wearily and closed the information windows around him one by one. After another hour, during which no signs of the slip could be detected, Vasilenko ordered the pinnace to return to Revelation. But the 2 crew members on duty in the pinnace didn't acknowledge the order. The radio only transmitted a hurried conversation between them. "Look out below! What's going on? It's rising! Don't touch it! Get out! My leg! Ah!" After the scream, the monitoring terminal on Revelation showed one of the crew members leaving the pinnace and activating the thrusters on his spacesuit in an attempt to escape. They saw a bright light. The source was the bottom of the pinnace, which was melting. The pinnace looked like a scoop of ice cream dropped onto a scalding sheet of glass. The bottom was melting and spreading in every direction. The glass was invisible, and the plane's existence was indicated only by the spreading pool of melted pinnace material. The pool spread into an extremely thin sheet and emitted bewitching, colorful lights, like fireworks scattered through a sheet of glass. The escaped crewman flew some distance, but seemed to be pulled by gravity toward that plane marked by the melting pinnace. His feet touched the plane and immediately melted into a shiny puddle. The rest of his body also began to spread out on the plane, and he had only time for a scream that was abruptly cut off. "All hands to hypergravitation seats! Full ahead!" As soon as he saw the escaping crewman's feet touch the invisible plane, Vasilenko gave the order. Revelation wasn't a stellar ship, so when it engaged in full ahead acceleration, the crew did not need to enter into the protective deep sea state. But the hypergravity was enough to sink everyone deep into their seats. Since the order was given in such a hurry, a few couldn't get to their seats in time and fell to the stern of the ship with injuries. Revelation's exhaust nozzles emitted a plasma stream several kilometers long that pierced the dark night of space. Far in the distance, where the pinnace was still melting, they could see the phosphorescent glow like the will-o'-wisps in the wilderness. From the zoomed-in view on the monitoring terminal, they could see that only the very top part of the pinnace was left, and that too soon disappeared into the brilliant plane. The body of the dead crewman was also diffused into the plane, showing up as a gigantic, man-shaped glow. His body had been transformed into a slice on the plane without thickness. Though large in area, it had no volume. And that, dear reader, is the fate that awaits everyone but 2 of the humans that are still in the solar system, other than the humans that were on Blue Earth and Gravity that did escape. That scene is basically recapitulated on steadily larger and larger scales over the course of the calamity over the next 100 pages. The sun is 2-dimensionalized. We get to see planet after planet get 2-dimensionalized. And the writing is amazing and evocative and fucking terrifying. One of the things...
And it's revealed that, not Rembrandt, Van Gogh essentially predicted this with a starry night. The sky looks like a starry night.
Yeah, where everything has been flattened into lines, basically.
Yeah. And giant, all the celestial bodies in that painting are enormous. At one point they look up from Pluto and they can see, I think, Neptune and Jupiter, and they're enormous.
It's like taking up almost the entire sky, just everywhere in space. And the way that 2-dimensionalization works is all the details are preserved at the quantum level. So you can see, in these flattened people, individual veins and whatnot, even as they're sort of projected into large, huge areas, because your intestines or something, I don't know what the actual number is, but it's 70 miles long or something like that. It's 12,000 bowls of colon blow. And
well, and I mean, really, as I understand it, if this were to if people were actually spread out into 2 dimensions, it would be infinite.
Yeah.
It would be even bigger than how it's represented. But what's later explained is that we're seeing a kind of light effect of the light escaping.
It's sort of like what you described, like sometimes in LA, that there's this like odd light bending effect where like some of the islands that are out in the ocean are kind of projected into this kind of larger view, and it's a mirage, and that's it's a similar. It's not exactly analogous, but it's a similar kind of idea.
Yeah. Where did I? Oh, I saw an amazing mirage the other day near Santa Cruz, where one of the mountains was just like twice as big as it normally would be.
That's so cool.
I think due to magnification. Yeah, that's extraordinary. It does make me think. Like, how do you feel about Cixin and AA being the ones who get to escape this? Does that feel okay? Or do they deserve to escape more than anybody else? Less than anybody else?
If anything, Cixin deserves it less.
Right.
But I also think that, I mean, this isn't a novel about morals, I think.
Right.
You know, and like, again, like there's this odd thing going on where it has to be them. And so I don't know. It's like Schrodinger's main character. We have no way of saying yes or no to that answer because we don't actually know what the mechanics. Which I think is great. I think it's great that these are the questions that we're asking. We're sort of like screwing around at the quantum level of literature. Yeah, which is great.
Yeah. And I mean, Luoji is, I mean, it's interesting because like Luoji is sort of like, he kind of cons them. At first he's like, you just, we're going to just throw the paintings out there so the aliens can see them in 2 dimensions. And he's like, you know what, why don't you just take them and go? And they're like, we can't, we don't have a light speed ship. And he's like, yeah, you do. And he seems to just be delighting. Like he's not particularly depressed about the destruction of everything, which is kind of the old Luoji, right? Like he's sort of completely carefree. He's ready to die. But there is this way in which you're sort of like, wait, why? And when they're racing everybody out, and you sort of there's this kind of sense that everybody who's trying to escape is sort of pathetic in a way, and also kind of like wrong. Like somehow the narrative idea that Cixin and AA get to escape and nobody else, the weight of that somehow feels okay. But then when you look at it, rationally, there's no real reason for that, other than I guess just the way we empathize with protagonists more than others, I guess, something like that.
Yeah, and I mean,
but maybe it's a little more complicated than that, too. I mean, maybe there's something else.
That moment that you pointed out where the other ships are like, if we have to die, they should die too. Yeah. And there does seem to be something... I mean, but this is the greatest unfairness of life, right? Like, there is no order to who gets to live and who gets to die. And, you know, and one of the very difficult things of making compelling stories is existing with the fact that these stories are 100% created and contrived, and yet they still need to mirror the problems and questions that we have as humans. And like that question of who gets to live and who gets to die and its unfairness is one that we're going to be wrestling with forever, as long as there are humans.
I think you just put your finger on something here too, which is that I think that we tend to feel betrayed or sad or frustrated by a writer who we sense is not playing fair with us and isn't actually describing life. And I think Cixin Liu gets away with it because he's grappling with real ideas about the nature of existence. Yeah. So even if the characters don't quite feel real and the situations are exaggerated, and he essentially creates these mythical characters who are kind of like on God's roller coaster through 18 million years. Talk about hapless protagonist. It's okay because he's kind of hooked you with the scope of the ideas that he's grappling with. And that's the part that feels true. And that's the part that feels sort of universal and human and feels like it's doing what literature is supposed to do.
Absolutely. Could not agree more.
Well, I'll read you my reading, and then I think that I would be ready.
I do want to read this poem at the end, and we'll see if we use it or we don't. But I think you will find it. I think just you will find it interesting. So if we end up cutting it, whatever. But yeah,
sounds great.
I'm so excited that you picked the Maelstrom part because I really loved that part.
There's so much you could read. So we're in Norway, and this is when AA and Chungshin and a few others are they've recognized the similarity of a place name in one of Yan Tianming's fairy tales and this name of a place in Norway. And they've gone there, and there's like one guy there. His name is Jason. He has a fishing boat, and he's built a replica lighthouse. And they're like, is there anything interesting here? And he's like, no, but I'll take you on a boat ride to the mountain. And they're like, well, that's only going to take a half hour, right? And he's like, no, we have to go around the maelstrom. It's going to take 3 hours. And they're all like, there's a maelstrom? And so they go out to take a look at the maelstrom, and the maelstrom is represented as a kind of like whirlpool in the ocean with a vortex that will crush ships. This is not physically true. There's nothing like this in the world. There are whirlpools that are created by tidal action, but they do not have crushing vortexes at their center. And he also presents it as a phenomenon that once the boat comes in, it can never escape, which proves to be a metaphor for something that's going to happen later in the story. But we're just kind of figuring that out. So they basically take the boat into the point of no return with the idea that, like, it's all right, we have a helicopter. They'll rescue us if we can't get out, which seems a little bit risky to me. Don't know, do they have a rope ladder? Like, how are they going to... Anyway, this is not explained. So this is kind of a long reading. I'll try to make it efficient. By now, the boat was so deep down in the whirlpool that the frothy waves at the rim were no longer visible. Behind them was the mountain formed of seawater, and they could only see the slow-moving top of the mountain at the other side of the whirlpool. Everyone felt the terror of being at the mercy of an irresistible force. Only the helicopter hovering overhead gave them any measure of comfort. "Let's have supper," said Jason. The sun had not yet set behind the clouds, but since it was the Arctic summer, it was already 9 p.m. Jason took a large cod out of the hold and explained that it had been freshly caught. Then he took out 3 bottles of wine, placed the fish on a large iron platter, and poured the bottle of wine over the fish. With a lighter, he set the fish on fire, explaining that this was the local method of preparation. 5 minutes later, he began to pull pieces off the still-burning fish and eat them. The passengers imitated him, enjoying the fish, wine, and the magnificence of the maelstrom. "Child, I recognize you," Jason said to Chungshin. "You were the sword holder. I'm sure that you and your people came here for some very important mission, but you must keep your cool. We can't avoid the apocalypse. We must enjoy the present." "I doubt you would keep your cool if that helicopter wasn't there," said AA. "Ha! Kid, I would. I surely would. Back in the common era, I was only 40 when I found out I had a terminal illness. But I wasn't afraid. I had never even planned to go into hibernation. It was only after I went into shock that the doctors put me into hibernation. By the time I woke up, it was already the deterrence era. I thought I'd been given a new life, but that turned out to be just an illusion. Death only backed off a little ways to wait for me on the road ahead. The night I finished building the lighthouse, I took my boat out to sea to look at it from a distance. And all of a sudden I had a thought. Death is the only lighthouse that is always lit. No matter where you sail, ultimately you must turn towards it. Everything fades in this world, but death endures. It had been 20 minutes since they entered the whirlpool, and the boat had slid about a third of the way down toward the bottom. The boat became more slanted, but due to the centrifugal force, the passengers weren't sliding down the port side. The wall of water filled their field of view, and they could no longer see the top, even on the other side of the whirlpool. Everyone avoided looking at the sky because, in the maelstrom, the boat moved along with a spinning wall of water, and it was almost impossible to feel the motion. The boat seemed to adhere to the side of the watery basin, but if they looked up, the motion instantly became evident. The cloud-filled sky spun overhead faster and faster, making them dizzy. Since the centrifugal force was stronger lower in the vortex, the water wall below the boat became even smoother and felt more solid, like ice. The rumbling from the eye of the maelstrom overwhelmed every other sound, and conversation was no longer possible. The sun in the west peeked out of the cracks in the cloud cover, and a ray of golden light shone into the swirling vortex, but the light couldn't reach the maw at the bottom, and only illuminated a small part of the wall of water, making the bottom appear even more dark and menacing by contrast. Mist and fog swirled out of the eye at the center, forming a rainbow in the ray of sunlight that arced grandly across the rotating abyss.
Yeah. It's great. Like, you know, it like moments like that make me, you know, I hanker for more of them, but understand that there can't be more of them, you know, like, because then, like we've already said, you know, like, we're up to, I think, just a shade under 1,400 pages. This one's like 600. The middle one's like 4 and change. Book 1, which you and I were like, whoa, there's a lot going on here, is like a tidy 370 pages or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, there would just be too much. And there's just so many wonderful things in here that upon re-listening to them, you know, they sort of have to match their speed. They can't look up because of the vertigo effect in the same way that the revelation kind of matches the rotation of the paper slip, so as to make it seem like the paper slip is not actually moving, when in fact they're all still moving, but they've just matched their movement towards it. The death as a lighthouse image, like, it just hovers beautifully over this entire trilogy. And again, like you pointed out, the translated title of this third book doesn't quite seem accurate.
Death is eternal.
Right. Yeah,
Death is the only thing that's eternal, or something like that, which is essentially, this is where that comes from, right? Yeah. This is Jason telling us that. Yeah. And it's so funny in this sequence, you get kind of like Poe-like gothic horror mixed with unspeakable beauty, mixed with this like physical description, centrifugal force, speed of rotation, mixed with let's have supper, let's light some fish on fire and eat the flaming chunks. And there's this moment when they're rescued by the helicopter. Moments later, they leave and they look down and they can see the boat swirling around, and they still see the blue light of the fire, like in the cod on fire, sort of like marking, swirling below.
It's you know, like, it is a literal moment of like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, you know. And it's great. Like, it's his name is Jason, for God's sakes. Like, you know.
Yes. No, and the illusions are they're thick as rain, right? You know, they're everywhere. One of the things we did not talk about is just Cixin Liu's view of how humanity, culture, and history constantly evaluates and reevaluates its attitude towards events and people. So the way that Luoji becomes sort of like a savior, and then he's a bum, and then he's a savior again, and then he's a bum again, and then he's a savior again, and then he's the sword holder, and he's a hero again, and then he's a genocider because he blew up that other thing, and then he's just a kooky old guy who we've forgotten about. And you get the same with Chengxian, has the exact same thing, where, you know, everybody blames her for not pushing the self-destruct button, and then they think, oh, that's actually probably why we hired her in the first place, and then they kind of blame her again, and that at all times he's watching this with this sort of the only objectivity that's possible, which is a recognition that whatever we all sort of agree on right now, there's a good chance we won't in 50 years or 100 years. And it's kind of hard to wrap our brains around that at most times. And I do think that's one of the big themes of this as well.
You want to go to trivia?
Yeah, I think you're going first, right?
I am going first. Yeah, I struggled to come up with trivia with this one. So, you know, this one might be a little bit of a whatever, but that's fine. Flattening 3 dimensions into 2, very clearly horrifying for me. But other works of art have used that same idea for funny or captivating ways. Which of the following Pixar movies represents a shift from 3 dimensions into 2, kind of going along with a shift from concrete to abstract thinking.
Okay.
Is it A, up, B, Wall-E, or C, inside out?
I don't remember it in Wall-E. It doesn't feel like up, so I'm going to guess inside out.
You nailed it. Yes. There is a moment when Joy and Sadness and Bing Bong have to cross the main character's center of abstract thought. And they enter, and at first, like, nothing goes wrong. And then they are quickly 2-dimensionalized, and they have a lot of trouble finding the door. Because the door is just a line now. And there's this hilarious moment where I think Sadness is like, no, we're getting abstracted. And they like basically turn into like this Juan Miro painting. And it's just like one of those moments where you're like, oh my God, guys, you are so smart. But way to go.
There was a moment like that in The Simpsons, I want to say 20 years ago. Too,
I think you're right.
I have a vague recollection of, Although I think it was the other direction. I think they became 3-dimensional. And I think it was to sort of showcase sort of the early dawn of age of the Pixar style animation. They made a Simpsons in that style.
Yeah.
But there was this moment where like they went through a portal. And they're not really 3-dimensional, but the rendering creates the illusion of 3 dimensions.
I think it was one of the Halloween episodes. I think it was Treehouse of Horrors.
Yeah.
And I believe one of the shots is Homer playing with his belly fat in such a way that it made like waves that you could see in the 3 dimensions.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, way to go.
Right.
Yeah, that's an impressive move in the other direction. I love it.
So one of my favorite parts of this book, of course, is the fairy tales and the wonderful encoding. I mean, you just read the fairy tales and the encoding scene would also be a great novella. History has lots of examples of prisoners using apparently innocent means to send a message outside using some kind of cultural production. I'm going to give you 4 examples. One of them is not true of this. So A is a Polish soldier who was forced to participate in the 1968 Warsaw Pact invasion of Czechoslovakia would sing what he claimed were traditional Polish folk songs near an open window, which included intelligence about troop movements and military assets. And apparently he'd tipped off the Czech resistance to listen outside the window. So that's A. B, during Vietnam, an A6 pilot who was captured by the Vietnamese was forced to do a kind of live TV interview and blinked the word torture in Morse code into the camera. C, in Singapore during World War II, women stitched the names of surviving family members onto quilts, which the Japanese allowed them to be distributed to POWs in this war prison, and they were also able to give little updates about family and who was alive and who was healthy and things like that by kind of encoding it into little stitched things. And then also on the stitching theme, a British soldier in a Nazi POW camp stitched an embroidered blanket that had a bunch of swastikas. So he claimed that he was just doing a tribute to his captors. But the border, which was a geographical pattern that seemed to be at random, actually spelled out God Save the King in Morse, and then also fuck Hitler in Morse code.
Wow, these are great. I'm pretty sure B is true. That one I think I've actually heard of, though this is going to be one of those things where it turns out that's like totally apocryphal and invented, and the reason I know about it is because it's apocryphal and invented. But I think that one's right.
Yes, let the self-doubt flow.
Begin. Oh my God.
Let the second guessing
thanks, Palpatine.
flow.
Oh my God.
Embrace the self-doubt.
Oh, I've embraced it.
Are you sure that's the answer? Or did you really hear about that? Or did you make it up?
Let's see. Singapore, Polish soldier, English POW.
Do you need the other one?
No,
There's one more.
I've got them all. You know, like I'm going to go with D as the not true one.
That one is true. I could find the name. Apparently, he did in fact do that. It doesn't exactly get intelligence out in the world, but it's a good morale boost when you're able to F -- Hitler, and the Nazis are like, oh yes, he's a good blanket. It's very nice. I like the swastikas. It's A, that there was no Polish soldier.
Oh, that was a good one. Nice
singing
job.
Polish folk tales out the window.
That's a good one. That was that one. Maybe it's just maybe it's my soft spot for Polish poets that sent me in that direction. No, that one really had the ring of truth. That was a good one.
You gonna read this? You gonna read these books again?
Yeah.
We're at the end of the Three Body Trilogy.
Yeah, I said last time. I said at the end of Dark Forest that I was going to reserve judgment. I will read these again. I may skip a big chunk of the Dark Forest, though. Also, part of me thinks like, no, give the thing that you struggled with the most another read. There was, just like the Maelstrom, there is a moment in this book where you can't stop. You did like both the writing and the inexorable pull of everything that he has put together begins to pay off, which is why the sort of coda epilogue feels a little odd. But I think it is in fact earned in the end. It's
not so odd that you don't want to write a 300-page summary of it during.
Totally. Yes. This is 3 reads for you. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've had my fill for a while.
Yeah.
I imagine I could see myself reading these books again in like 20 years.
Yeah.
It's probably been something like 20 years since I read the Foundation trilogy. And I think maybe sometime soon I'll revisit those.
Well, folks, we are shrinking the scale. The next book is small and tidy. It's quite small. I think it's just a shade over 120 pages. This is a quick one. Tim Krabbe, he is a Dutch writer. I'm guessing Krabbe is not actually the way you pronounce it. His novel, The Rider, in its entirety. So bang that out and get ready to talk about wonderful 1970s bicycles and a surprising amount of mashed potatoes that shows up in ways that you wouldn't expect.
Ooh, I wouldn't expect, huh? Upper Middlebrow is a small point production. Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes are constantly decoding fairy tales. Music by Ben Pajak and Jesse Dukes. Design and website by Chris Bagg. We are supported by Jenny Grieve and Justin Reich. And Jenny Grieve is going to get her half hour of editorial time. Mm-hmm. Find us on Patreon, where there are a number of tiers at which you could show your support and also get a half hour of editorial time.
Or more. And as a reminder, Jesse and I are both writers and editors, and we can help you with your writing, podcasting, or editing project. You can see some of our portfolios and learn more at our respective websites, chrisbag.com and jessedukes.com. Also, we have bookmarks. Finally, a rasher of them is on their way to Jesse's apartment and to Justin's apartment. And when I finally find a card...
At Jenny's apartment?
No, when I finally find a card suitable enough to be like, Jenny, I'm so sorry that you haven't had these yet. I am going to deliver those to her. I think it will have something to do with Baby Yoda.
Sounds great. I'm sure Jenny G and Ben will very much enjoy that. Excited. If somebody asks, do you want a Lightspeed Drive Civilization? The answer is yes.
100%.
It's like the reverse of Winston in Ghostbusters.